All right. Well, welcome everybody. This is Brian Watson from CleanTech North, and I'm joined by Paul Connor of CleanTech North, Devin McCarthy, and Christine from Sussex Strategy, and Christine Haas from Renix. I'm not going to say as much as I normally do today because we do have a packed agenda, but I do want to thank all of our sponsors. First off, Export Development Canada. So hopefully we'll have Lynn say a few words on some of what they're doing right now a little bit later. Flow Ventures, the City of Toronto and the Startup Here program, and the Advise TO program at the City of Toronto, who are helping us put on these webinars to help support the clean tech ecosystem within the Toronto community, and obviously from around Canada. Actually, we've got people tuning in. So, welcome everybody. I've mentioned most of our sponsors already, so there are some remaining ones like Climate Ventures CSI, Barnaby and Shay are probably in the audience already, RBC Group with Peter MacArthur, and a number of other folks, at Goodman's included. I did want to say this is coming up, I believe that's next week now. So this is probably the biggest single week in clean tech in Canada. Obviously, this is a digital event, as I don't think 300 of us are going to be getting together in Mars anytime soon. But the program is really quite strong. There are 2 links there. I'll share those out afterwards instead of you trying to copy down links that definitely will not be easy to transcribe. But I'll send those out. And I highly encourage everybody from the clean tech ecosystem to join us there. And Lynn will probably have a little bit more to say about that. With that, that's really all I have to say. I really wanted to bring in Devin from Sussex Strategy. Sussex does a lot of work on the government relations PR side. I'll let Devin give a little bit more of his background. But with the throne speech being the way it was, I thought it wise to bring in a professional. As you all know, I've spent a little bit of time on the policy side with the Ontario Clean Tech Industry Association and CleanTech North over the years. But Devin is definitely in the trenches, so we wanted to pass it over to him and give him a chance to say a few words about what he can read from the entrails of the throne speech. So, Devin, I'm going to mute myself and over to you.
Thank you very much. Am I coming through okay?
Perfectly on my end.
Perfect. So I'm just going to share my screen here. Okay, perfect. I'm seeing nods, so away we go. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to speak here today. You know, as noted, the genesis of this conversation was really sort of a post-throne speech debrief and also you know, a bit of a kvetching session, a wine fest about the fact that there wasn't more detailed in that speech, as was sort of hinted and you know, in some of my conversations with ministerial staffers, almost promised over the course of the summer. And what, you know, what was presented on September 23rd was you know, in many ways, a reiteration of the pre-existing campaign platform of the Liberals in the last election, and actually the energy and environment section of the speech very much mirrored the language that was presented in the speech from the throne following that election at the end of 2019. So not a lot of new information or new commitments or indeed new promises of money on the table. But I think in certainly in the days following and now in the several weeks since September 23rd, you know, I did think that it's worth and indeed valuable to kind of take a step back. Where are we in the green energy infrastructure clean tech conversation, and sort of how does that sit within this political moment, which is in many ways unique, but in many ways remains promising for sort of the interests that I know we all hold dear on this call. who are we at Sussex? Let me see if I can move this over here. Yeah. So we're a government relations, digital advocacy, communications firm with offices in Toronto and Ottawa. I head up the Ottawa office. I focus on federal policy, and we have affiliates across the country, notably Montreal and Vancouver on our team, and then some other firms that we work with coast to coast to coast. I think we just reached our 30th member of the team over the last month or so, and we've been active since 1998. Myself personally, I've been with Sussex for about 2 years. Before that, spent almost 10 years with the Canadian Electricity Association, working on all manner of the electricity file, from distribution and smart grid up to transmission and siting and social license, right up to generation and climate policy. And spent the last 3 years there as the VP of Public Affairs. And then before that, I worked in government in the Privy Council office, and I had a blog in 2007, 2008 called Canadian CleanTech that wasn't very well widely read and probably wasn't incredibly well written. I was in my mid-20s at the time. And just trying to, it's just a personal interest of mine. So I was blogging on it and researching, and I've sort of held that with me over the past 15 years. So today, federal political landscape and context, funding mechanisms, which I'll move through very, very quickly on the existing side, future funding mechanisms, sort of what's between the lines of the throne speech, I think is really the focus for today. I mean, I'm not going to rehash really in any detail the contents of the throne speech. Those are publicly available. I think what we're trying to do over the next 20 minutes is connect the dots, and then a few thoughts on where to from here and discussion. So on the broader political landscape, I mean, certainly, as everybody knows, we're in the most challenging moment of a generation. And I think the Prime Minister, we scandal aside, has done a pretty credible job in managing the crisis. And I'll show a slide next that I think bears that out. The questions are getting tougher around, procurement practices is the big focus in the Health Committee today, where a vote is taking place as we speak on greater transparency and bringing files forward. Rapid testing is an issue, and second wave is certainly upon us, and there are going to be challenges in how the government responds to that. I mean, a senior person in PMO said to me in sort of the couple of weeks leading up to the throne speech, we can't have this. We can't declare victory on COVID. We know there's a second wave coming, almost certainly. And what we don't want is sort of the World War One. The soldiers will be home by Christmas, and 4 years later they're still fighting in the trenches. So we have to keep some powder dry. We have to take a very calibrated approach in our response, both our response to COVID, but also our post-pandemic economic recovery. And then Aaron O'Toole is hitting his stride as the new leader of the Conservative Party. Annamie Paul is actually running in the by-election today in Toronto, has brought fresh energy to the Green Party, and we're in a minority government position, which is sort of, I think has a few months, if not a few quarters left in it, but it is sort of touch and go now every week. So I'll sort of lay the landscape in three charts. The first, just as minority government territory. As I said, over the summer, the Liberals got a pretty good boost in the poll for how they managed the pandemic. And that's tightened up a little bit going into the fall and as the second wave is upon us, but they're still in a pretty decent position. And with the NDP, enjoying the role of sort of kingmaker on Liberal policies and supporting their legislation, but working in NDP asks. I mean, that's a good position for that party, and as long as they can continue to sort of feel like the Liberals are moving in a direction that their party can support, I think Jagmeet Singh will continue to prop up the Liberals, which I think is, for the clean tech space, a good outcome for as long as it can last. And then sort of fitting within that political context is a real mandate that the Liberals won the last election on, and are expected to deliver upon, COVID or not. So certainly the commitment to exceed Canada's 2030 emission goals of 30% emission reduction on 2005 levels is front and center. I mean, there's 10 years left, and then achieving net zero emissions by 2050 is another major policy that is really guiding Liberal decision making these days, leading on pollution pricing, implementing the recommendations of the Generation Energy Report. I mean, wide scale energy system transition is not a new idea, certainly in Canada and with these Liberals. I mean, they've been at this for 5 years, spilled a lot of ink on it, and I think in a lot of quarters of the clean energy space, and I represent clients in Ottawa in quite a few of those pockets and sub sectors of clean and renewable energy. There's a sense of a lot of good language has been expressed, but it's time to sort of show leadership and put dollars on the table and make some of these projects a reality. Ensuring the just transition for energy workers and communities, and helping on the climate resilience side of things as well. And so this second slide is there's that political reality, minority government, and then there's this reality of needing to do more and faster in order to achieve our 2030 emission targets, which are currently not on track. And then the third sort of chart that I wanted to use to sort of frame the comments is the COVID case count in Canada. So budget 2020 was supposed to land on March 30th, and then 2 weeks before that was sort of that Friday the 13th of March, where it became increasingly apparent and right in everybody's face, I think, that the world had shifted, and it would take some time to understand where it had landed. But very quickly, there was an outreach by government around what would green economic recovery stimulus look like, or what should it look like. And there were informal consultations. I know that the Centre, the Prime Minister's Office, Finance, didn't want to lead with that. They didn't want to give a lot of attention to it, because their messaging to Canadians was, we are 100% focused on keeping Canadians safe and sort of managing the most acute impacts of businesses shutting down and workers being laid off. But there was, amongst some of the line ministers, McKenna and Baines and Wilkinson and Guilbeault and O'Regan, there were discussions around what should be done for economic recovery, and clean energy almost always featured very prominently: clean tech, green infrastructure. And so there was a lot of conversation about that. And then sort of right around kind of May to June, PMO and Finance really kind of pumped the brakes and said, there were a few articles that came out about these informal consultations. And there was really like, okay, let's slow down on this and make sure that we have our COVID house in order. And then the throne speech was really meant to be that big reveal in a lot of ways of what that consultation had come up with over the summer, and what the government was thinking in terms of green infrastructure stimulus. And as we approached the throne speech, I just had that sinking feeling that every day we were sort of losing ground on what the government felt comfortable going forward with. And you can just see in the chart the case count just increasing and increasing until I think the speech that was delivered on the 23rd. I think it represents the continued ambitions of the government, but I think it underrepresented the amount of work and detailed thinking and planning that is and prioritization that has taken place, not just through the pandemic, but through the last election cycle on how the government wants to move forward and some of their priority areas. So that sort of brings us to the throne speech and where we are today, and so underlying that, the fact that there wasn't as much detail as I would have loved to have seen in the throne speech, there are still some milestones that are coming up that I think are going to help elucidate that thinking, and I would note that the throne speech had 4 pillars, and energy and environment was one of the 4 pillars. So I think if you were coming to this, fresh, if you were perhaps a German citizen or a European citizen or somebody from elsewhere in the world who didn't really know the liberal prioritizations and had heard it, you would say, oh, that was very prominent for the energy and environment files and energy system transition and greenhouse gas emission reductions. But so it was one of the 4 pillars, and there was a flag put in the ground there, but it still didn't have that detail that I think people were hoping for, those clear commitments. But this is the cast of characters that continues to do that work, and they each have funding mechanisms and policy levers that are either in place today, like the Climate Action Incentive Fund, like the Canada Infrastructure Bank, like the integrated bilateral agreements, that actually have a lot of funding. I mean, they're some of the areas of government with the most funding currently. So it's a question of mobilizing that capital that's already in place, and then they're each working on sort of the new bells and whistles that align with or programs and policies that will accelerate other areas of clean tech, clean energy, green infrastructure that they want to see come to fruition. And in these, when you speak with the staff in these offices or the ministers in a non-media covered setting, they're quite keen to talk about the opportunity of the moment, that Canada has to make progress on our climate action and do so very quickly, and that there is a generational opportunity here to invest in that transition. So they're quite bullish on that. It's just a matter of really managing the pandemic to a level where they can execute. In some of those areas, we have funding mechanisms, existing funding mechanisms, as I mentioned, and I just want to highlight a couple of them rather quickly. And it's hard for me to tell if questions are coming through, but maybe just before Brian, I would just ask you before I jump into this if you've seen any questions come in that you think I should address now and sort of take a pause.
No, I think this is great, Devin. I think it's really. I'd love to see exactly what you're talking about now, where people should be focusing and really focusing their attention in terms of potential, milestones over the next couple of months that they should be watching for that might unleash some of these, this money, so that we can get projects going.
For sure. And two of those milestones certainly are the mandate letters, which should be out any time now, which again reinforce what the ministers are meant to deliver. on behalf of the government. So usually some good signals there. And then there's this existing money. Watch how it is rolled forward and announced. And we've seen announcements of this lately, including the Canada Infrastructure Bank, which I'll touch on in a second. And then the third is new money, is the fall economic statement, which promises to put new money on the table, whether it's recapitalizing existing programs that are currently have worked through their funding envelopes, or brand new programs that the government commits to and actually backs up with funding. So in terms of the existing, the Climate Action Incentive Fund, this is the side of the federal carbon pricing system that's the distributed fuel charge. So on things like home heating, natural gas, or in the commercial and smaller industrial space, the mush sector, driving your car, 10% of those carbon revenues go into a climate action incentive fund, which will reinvest that revenue back into the province in which it was collected, and we're talking $2.8 billion that's going to be collected over the next 4 years. It's a major program that really has been slow to get off the mark. So there was a call for proposals that people may be familiar with last summer. It took the government until early this year to select projects that had applied, and then it took for most projects well into the summer, some into August, to sign contribution agreements. And now I'm working with a client, and we're trying to help with some movement on the deadlines for these projects to get built. It took so long that these projects have been put in a tough spot in terms of now a very short window for completion. But the Environment and Climate Change Canada is taking these learnings, and they are going to roll out a second round. That was a $50 million round. They were supposed to do a second one before the end of last year. It never happened because of the election, and now they've been sitting on it so far this year. But this is money that's coming into federal coffers. By legislation, by law, it has to be reinvested. It can't just sort of disappear into other priorities. And so, this is certainly one to watch. It's the two streams that they went out with last time. The main one was SMEs. There's been some announcements around mush sector work in schools, energy efficiency, but it's a lot of money that is rolling out and needs to be spent by law over the next 3 or 4 years. Federation of Canadian Municipalities, they received $1 billion in budget 2019, a year and a half ago. They're just starting to roll out those programs around community and efficiency financing and sustainable, affordable housing. Get in touch with the Green Municipal Fund team there. It's continuous intake. They're always looking for good projects that generally they're looking for projects that reduce energy demand and greenhouse gas emissions. The Canada Infrastructure Bank on October 1st came out with their new 3-year growth plan and earmarked quite a significant amount of money across the spectrum: public transit, clean power, green infrastructure, broadband, trade and transport. One of the challenges with the CIB to date has been that they're looking for large check sizes. They want to be writing $100 million checks for sort of 40% of the capital required in a project. So you're looking at a $250 million project plus, and within these buckets, there's work going on to sort of downscale that. So, for example, under the green infrastructure bucket, They're looking at, they have two streams. One is public sector buildings. They're working with Infrastructure Ontario and the City of Toronto to have those institutions pull together portfolios of projects that the CIB can finance. But they're also working on a private sector stream where they will have private sector actors pull together portfolios of retrofit projects where, you know, it could be $25 million projects, and their threshold will likely be a portfolio minimum size of 25 million, 3% interest over 20 years, and the CIB would put in 80% of the capital, or up to 80% of the capital for this portfolio of projects. So it's essentially an aggregator model that they're using. They don't have the capacity themselves to get into due diligence $1 million at a time for projects, but they're hoping that they can bring aggregators to the table to do that, and then they sort of finance the portfolio of projects. So all that to say, there's just a lot happening at the Canada Infrastructure Bank right now. A lot of positive work. They're trying to be more innovative under their new board chair, Michael Sabia, and you know, I mean, they went into the pandemic sitting on $31 billion that they need to move into the economy. So it's one of those mechanisms that is very well funded. Just needs to move that capital into projects.
Devin, we have. I just let the audience know that we're going to extend this portion to about 4:40 because we started a few minutes late, and we do have a couple questions trickling in. Let me know when you want to tackle those.
Sure, sounds good. I'll just get to the end of this and then turn it over to the questions. Integrated bilateral agreements, it again is a big pot of money that's been sitting in coffers for quite some time, but you know, it really requires other levels of government, the provinces, the territories, to bring those projects forward. There's the greening government strategy, whereby, you know, the government is looking to greatly reduce its own emissions. On the electricity side, 100% clean electricity by 2022, and they've gone out with an RFI and now have been dragging their feet on the RFP to achieve that. But you know, one of the big question marks is on the thermal side. Thermal energy in government buildings, how do they tackle that? And I think that's an answer that they haven't arrived at yet. There's the super clusters, which are, you know, according to the parliamentary budget officer, underperforming in moving money into the economy as promised. And then, you know, certainly the SD Tech Fund, regional economic development agencies, Business Development Canada, Export Development Canada, who is sponsoring the event today. I mean, there is all this to say, there is money in the system currently, and I think that a lot of the work that's happening, and that I was hoping to see more of in the throne speech, is how do we accelerate getting this money into good projects that create jobs in the short term, regional economic growth in the near term and the longer term, and put Canada on a pathway to achieving its greenhouse gas emission targets and sustainability goals. So there's a lot there, a lot of doors to knock on, but I do think that bureaucrats and ministerial staff are feeling very motivated to get good projects into the pipeline in preparation for a post-pandemic recovery period. And then for the fall economic statement, sort of where to from here. I mean, I was looking in the throne speech for signals around, you know, funding to implement the hydrogen strategy that's being developed, the small modular reactor action plan implementation. I mean, that's going to be costly and require that the federal government, you know, sort of put its money where its intentions are. recapitalization of NRCan funding mechanisms, the emerging renewables program, the smart grid program, EV infrastructure. I mean, sort of the programs that they've managed over the past 2 or 3 years. I know that they're, Marco Presutti and his team are really keen to see those mechanisms recapitalized. The Strategic Innovation Fund needs recapitalization, and I spoke to somebody in Minister Bain's office recently, and she felt very confident that was in the works. And then there's the platform promises, 1.5 million home energy retrofits done across the country on $40,000 loans from the government, training for auditors and energy managers, recapitalize EV rebate mechanisms, and then what was in the throne speech, which is appreciated, corporate tax cuts, by 50% for clean tech firms. So they need to deliver on that. So, between, I had that moment of sort of, where I was a bit disheartened by listening to the speech, and then I sort of stepped back and reminded myself of just how much is out there currently, and sort of the, what seems to be or looks to be in the works, based on my conversations that I have across government, most days and certainly most weeks. And then I guess the last slide, just where to from here. Certainly individual companies going after those funding mechanisms and making clear to government that if new ones are brought forward, they'll be put to good use. I mean, that's always helpful to communicate that. But really, I think as a collective, as a sector, we really need to be communicating wherever we can that it's a generational opportunity to step change towards the infrastructure and economy that will power Canada's future. Clean tech investments now support good paying jobs and economic recovery, like today, while building a more resilient Canada for the future. Governments must walk the talk by acting as buyers of Canadian clean tech. I know that's an ongoing challenge and concern. Canadian, domestic deployment of the technologies, and government should fund, deployment of technology for the 2030 targets, and development certainly to achieve 2050. And then programs must be designed in ways that recognize the varying scale of clean tech projects as well as the diversity in technologies. So, that's some of the stuff that I've been communicating with my clients to government, and I think that there is a receptive audience there, and both senior officials and ministerial staff looking for allies in that conversation. So I think I'll wrap there. Thank you, Brian, for giving me a few extra minutes, because once I get ahead of steam, I tend to talk a lot, but I appreciate it.
Well, no, that's great. And there are a couple questions that I did want to sort of rip through fairly quickly, if we can, though. One is, how important is the shovel-ready nature of projects or technologies? We deal with clean tech, so a lot of our technology companies are at the pilot stage. They need testing beds. There's a fear that they will be left out in the cold versus big projects, solar farms, things like that. What are your thoughts on the shovel readiness and the technology versus the project type companies and their ability to tap into this?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it sort of speaks to, I think, my second last bullet on that last slide, which was I think the reality is that the government, like if you talk to environment and climate change, they're focused almost solely on greenhouse gas emission reductions as quick as possible. So they're looking for, like under the Climate Action Incentive Fund, for example, they're more interested in deployment of technologies that have a track record of achieving the outcomes that they're looking for, because they're laser focused on that 30%. Whereas you have NRCan that's more focused on building that technology pipeline that's going to get us to 2030, through 2030, and on to 2050. So I think it's just I think that there's a spot for everybody along the spectrum. It's just a matter of finding kind of who is best aligned with where you are at in the technology development spectrum.
Yeah, it's interesting because I do know that a lot of our companies that are in, say, water tech, green chemistry, even intelligent agriculture, where it mitigates impacts on the economy, aren't seeing themselves through that GHG lens. So they're still trying to find their spot in that. Maybe I'll leave that as a comment more than anything else. I did want to address Arthur's question here. Can you speak to the intake aspects of the clean power funds through the infrastructure bank? And then we do have one other question about the national hydrogen strategy that you've somewhat answered, but I'll circle back to afterwards. So aspects of the clean power funds through the infrastructure bank.
Sure. Yeah. So the CIB, like FCM, is continuous intake. So there's a team at the Canada Infrastructure Bank headed up by Sachin Gunaratne, who basically meet with project proponents, and the challenges is the scale that they're looking for. I mean, they are looking for those $200 million projects, but there are two areas that they're really working on sort of downscaling. One is Indigenous project, not necessarily Indigenous led, but projects that have a really strong Indigenous benefit or component. I think they're looking at how do they sort of streamline the due diligence process to get it down under a $50 million check size for their participation. And then they're also working on a renewables program for wind and solar, non-emitting power in Alberta, and using that as a sort of pilot to try to downscale their involvement on the wind and the solar side of things. But the Clean Power Fund is a bit tricky because they're looking at transmission interties, the sort of $1 billion project is what they're chasing there. But it is continuous intake, so give them a call if you have something to pitch.
Perfect. That's great. We have two more questions. One is on the national hydrogen strategy. You mentioned that no real indication. If you had to guess, prognostication as opposed to information. Any thoughts?
I think it's imminent. Certainly before the holidays. I'm on a call. I think it's a Canadian Gas Association has a call. Aaron Hoskins is presenting tomorrow, so hoping for a bit of an update there. But it's ministerial discretion on when it's launched. I think it's pretty much ready to go. It just needs the right moment for the minister to feel comfortable putting it out there. And right now, with everything that's happening in the House of Commons, I'm gesturing like this over at my ever-present CPAC running in the background. But and if there are questions about whether the government is going to survive this week, they're not going to launch a hydrogen strategy into that. But I'm hoping after this latest round of political craziness subsides, they'll turn their attention to actual policy development and announcements.
Great. And then we got one last one here, and then I want to move on because I want to leave some time certainly for Renix here. But one last quick question, maybe one or two lines on this. Do you know if there would be funding, and from whom, for a CleanTech project at the James Bay, to mine that lithium deposit, I believe is the question. So I guess there's a lithium deposit there. I'm not familiar with that one, but to access or to mine that.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably look to there. I have two suggestions. One would be regional economic development agencies. I mean, they do have money to put forward to project development and scale up. But the other one, and there's as some of you are likely familiar with, there is a Clean Growth Hub that is housed at innovation, science, and industry, and they're really good at triaging for project proponents where you can find or how to best connect you to existing funding streams. So for one like that's that specific, the Clean Growth Hub might be your best bet. Send them a note and say, here's what I'm after. Whose door should I be knocking on?
Devin, actually, that's a great note, and so I want to say thank you for your insights today. I know there's been some requests to share the slides, and we've been recording, so we'll edit that and hopefully be able to share the slides. And I also wanted to say you're spot on. The Clean Growth Hub has actually been a great partner throughout all of this. On the Ontario CleanTech Industry Association side, OCTIA, they've been a great partner in helping connect our member companies to that, which I suppose is both a plug for them and for joining the Ontario CleanTech Industry Association. So with that, I did actually want to pass it over to one of our other partners, Lynn Cote from EDC. Lynn, I see you there and you're on mute, and I've got some slides. I don't know if you want me to pull those up with the details or not, but I will do so unless I hear otherwise.
Okay, well, that's a nice picture of Devin. That's not me. I'm a little worse for wear today. Devin, oh, look at me. Oh, that was me on a good day. Devin, thank you. That was super interesting. And yeah, I'd love to see those slides. So thank you very much, Brian. So my name is Lynn Cote. I'm the CleanTech lead at Export Development Canada. And just a quick plug if you want for our event. Oh, wow. Next week. So CleanTech Export Week, our fourth annual event is happening next week. Like every other event, we've gone virtual this year. So you'll see in the slides, there's two different registrations. So we have a conference the afternoon of next Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And then we have a webinar on Thursday. They run on two different platforms, so the registrations are separate. I know it's not ideal, but tis the way of the world with all these different platforms. We're really excited about the programming. It'll give you something to think about other than other things that may be happening next week. And we've got some fantastic Canadian companies from many diverse sectors and from all across Canada, including for the first time coast to coast. So we have representation from Newfoundland, so we're very excited about that. And we have a great program. Monday is really going to be focused on economics. Our chief economist is going to speak. Peter Hall is our chief economist. He's amazing. And then we're going to have a panel focused on companies who pivoted during COVID. We're going to announce and then show videos of this year's export stars. Tuesday is going to be dedicated to partnerships. So Mars will be doing a panel with three other momentum companies, and then SCTC will be doing a panel with some unusual clean tech companies in sectors that you normally might not associate with clean tech. So we're really happy to have both of them. And then we're going to finish off that day with a pitch session. So we'll have 5 or 6 companies, maybe 7. It seems to be changing quite a bit, who are going to pitch in front of all of you and in front of a jury. Whoever wins a little statue. It's not a monetary prize, but it's really exciting to see the different companies, and they're all at different stages. So I think it's it just shows the diversity and the strength of our ecosystem. And then on Wednesday, we are going to be, that is the focus on Wednesday is really going to be about diversity. We're going to have a keynote by Annette Verschuren, who I think everybody knows. She's the CEO and chair of NR Store. She's also chair of the board of SCTC, I think Mars, or at least on the board of Mars, and on the board of, I think, everything that matters in Canada. So we're really excited to have her. I'm excited because I get to do the Q&A with her. So that's a big thing for me personally. And then we're going to have a great panel of women founders and CEOs of companies talking about their specific experiences. And we're going to round out the day with the last two videos of our ones to watch, which are two companies that we're really very excited about, and the ecosystem is excited about their potential. And then on Thursday, we're going to have a fantastic webinar. We're really excited. So we have the brand new Chief Trade Commissioner of Canada, Sarah Wilshaw, who's replaced Ailish Campbell. So this is her first public foray, and she's amazing. And we're going to have the equally amazing Toby Heaps from Corporate Knights, who are going to be talking about the green recovery. So, Devin, what you've been talking about, and as many of you would know, Corporate Knights led a really great series on building back better. So a lot of it will be, okay, what does it mean? And then what does it mean for Canadian companies as they look to export the technologies, and how having a stronger Canadian economy, a stronger Canadian clean tech ecosystem leads to stronger international opportunities. So we're very excited about next week. If you can't make it, I know everybody, we're all zoomed out, like literally, and everything will be recorded. So if you register through Eventbrite, and then you'll get a follow-up email from the app that we're using, which is Whova. I always say Whova, I don't know why, but it is Whova, and everything will be there. And we will also post everything on the CleanTech page on EDC. So it's edc.ca/CleanTech. All the videos of the export stars, the ones to watch, their profiles, which are really cool, and how we had to do the videos because we couldn't do them the normal way. I'm really impressed with my colleagues who were able to do that. So some great content, some original content, and what we want is to remind us all what we're doing it for, right? We have a great ecosystem in Canada, some great companies, some great founders, CEOs, leaders, and we want to celebrate them in what is a very, very, very weird year. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you so much, Brian, for the opportunity.
You're most welcome, Lynn. Thank you for all the support over the year. And with that, I want to turn it over to Christine Haas from Renix. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and while she gets set up here, I'm going to just say that this is a company that I've been watching for quite a while. They are a company backed by one of the angel groups that I've got some history with. So it's actually really great and to see her here and possibly tell you about a few new awards that she's won. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Christine.
Thanks, Brian. It's really great to connect, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to your group today. We don't specifically work in greenhouse gas emission technologies, but we kind of, I firmly believe that all the sustainable technologies all connect to each other and they all interact. So I'll tell you a little bit about what we do. Renix is a clean tech startup company. We work in liquid separation and purification, and we work with resource processors. So I'll talk a little bit more about that going forward here. We started with this technology, came out of Western University, basic and applied research stage, so glass on a bench, and we've gone through a couple of stages of scale up and technology development. We just recently closed our first commercial sale over $1 million in December of last year for a food processor in the United States. and we're currently building that right now. And then we have another licensing play in the mining industry to take our technology in the mining industry. So we're kind of, we're involved in a lot of different resource areas. We are at that point where we're poised to take the next step from right into full commercial operations. And so we've just recently been searching for a strategic capital partner to support the company's growth, and we'll be looking to do that early in the new year. So just to start off telling everybody what we're about, that's let me tell you a little bit about Renix. There we go. I like to start talking about Renix's market with two numbers, and that's 10 billion and 1. So sometime around 2050, the world population is predicted to hit 10 billion people, and we have one planet. That one planet gives us everything. I think of it as we have one set of resources, not multiple sets of resources, but just one. And we get everything we need from that, whether it's food, water, energy, fuel, metals to build cell phones and laptops and all these things, our houses, our cars, it all comes from one place. And while the providers of all these different resources certainly have some differences in the way they do things, they also have some pretty common problems that we've come to look at. And these problems are really escalating business risk and increasing processing costs at the same time. Those problems being lower grade sources, increased regulation, and a really, really big recent one, social license to operate. If you think about it just generally, if you went back in time, you could say, oh, we used to go over here and get our water and go over here and grow our food and go over here and get our metals and go over there and get our oil. Today, more so in other areas of the world maybe, but these are increasingly overlapped. And not only does that make it a challenge to have competition over resources, but it's also that they cross-contaminate with each other. And this is really causing a lot of challenges. So what do these resource processors do? Well, they need new tools, bottom line, so that they can solve some of these processing issues. And those tools need to be not only effective, they have to be efficient and cost effective and sustainable in order to meet all the needs of this potentially 10 billion people in not a very long time frame from now. And the issue is specifically in the industry we're in, which is liquid separation, is that the conventional technologies, they don't really work very well to address these new emerging challenges, especially given the chemistry related challenges that we deal with. So what we've done at Renix, we have one tool that is used in this separation process. It's called Renix UIX, which is the uninterrupted ion exchange. So what we've done with that is we're using a very well-proven science, which is something called ion exchange. It's a separation chemistry used to take dissolved compounds out of liquids, whether that's water or a food product or whatever that may be. And we've created a new engineered platform to do that chemistry with so that we can have a more responsible, more efficient, more effective, and sustainable solution. Just to really quickly explain a little bit about how it works. The concept of ion exchange is that they have these small polymer beads that have a chemical functional group on them. That functional group grabs whatever's in the liquid that you want to separate, whether that be good or bad. These polymer beads have a limited capacity. So you fill a tank full of the beads get loaded. They can only grab so much. Once they do, you have to basically regenerate them. And to do so in a traditional platform, you take it offline, you regenerate it, you put it back online. If you're a processor working a 24/7 operation or facility, this is not so good for your facility because, to give an example, in the food industry, there are lots of applications where this happens multiple times a day. So this is not the kind of thing where you run it and maybe once a quarter or a couple times a year you regenerate. This is happening on a daily basis or multiple times a day. So it's a really problematic situation for the processors. So what they do, they install a whole bunch of them, and then they all run on different cycles. Our technology platform does the two things simultaneously. So you're loading and unloading the resin. And by doing that, we give them a steady state process that has a bunch of advantages. So there's really three pieces to the technology. This is on our website. If anybody wants to go learn a little more about it, it kind of explains how the technology works. But really, there's three pieces. I've mentioned them. One is capture, go get that stuff out of the liquid, whatever it is. Two is regenerate, and with our technology, do it at a lower OPEX, use less energy, less water, less chemical, and have a smaller operating footprint. And then control, a robust industrial control and good data management and high yield variable rate. All of those things create advantages for the processors. Those advantages fall in four categories. Basically, they solve complex problems. These are those issues I talked about early on about overlapping lower grade sources. The second being smaller operating footprints. So we had a third party do a comparison between our technology and the conventional technology in a food application. And we got greater than 60% smaller operating footprint. That means less water, less energy, less waste, less CO2, SO2, PO3, less real estate, and less operating costs. So it just gives you a sense of how ineffective or inefficient the older technology is and the opportunity for improvement. The big one here, the fourth category, in essence, is actually the one we get the most calls about. So potential customers calling us, and that is, all of this talks about why it's better than somebody else's technology, but what this talks about is what can it do for the processor. So water management, for example, when I talk about water management, I'm not speaking about municipal water, but if you're an industrial processor using high volumes of water, how can you reuse that water instead of continuing to take it from someplace else and put it back into the environment? That recycling of water process is very challenging in a lot of areas. So water management, social license to operate, value recovery is a big one, and the circular economy, because similar to the oil and gas business, where they take a barrel of oil and turn it not only into fuel, but into fuel and chemicals and all kinds of things, use every single ounce of that barrel. All industries are trying to take value from the things that are left over from their processes. So there's a bunch of advantages. They're pretty techy, but they fall into those categories. In terms of where Renix is, we did start with glass on a bench. Early scale research, we've taken it through 2 stages of scale up in the development process, and we worked with end users at the time. So we had some great partners that let us run our technology side by side with the conventional so that we could see and measure how we use that not only to guide our development, but also to support our sales process. And then, as I mentioned earlier, end of last year, we sold our first full-scale commercial system, which is going into the US in the food industry, and it's in construction right now. So that's kind of where we are. Just wanted to mention on the call today is myself, also Glenn Farrow's on here someplace. Hi, Glenn. He's working with us in corporate finance, and some of our key technical team members are here. But just wanted to leave you with, we've gone through working in agriculture, in biochemicals, in mining applications, in industrial water applications, through all those scale-up stages, and currently doing the direct sales in the food industry, but also have a licensing model that we're working with for them entering the mining industry right now in a couple of other areas. We are moving to full commercial operations and on the search for a strategic capital partner to support our growth, and that will be early next year. There's my email address. Glenn and I would both love to talk to anybody who wants to talk to us more. We are looking for contacts, supporters, advocates, customers, and finance. So we'd love to talk to anybody from the clean tech industry, and I really appreciate being part of this today. And thanks also to Devin. That was great to sit down on that discussion as well. And that's it. I'll leave it at that.
Perfect, Christine. That's really great. Thank you very much. It's and quite frankly, if you're not going to toot your own horn, I'm going to do it for you. What was the name of the award that you just won out of London there?
Right. We yes, we just won the Business Achievement Award for Innovation in London. Yes. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Not a problem. We got to celebrate all of our successes.
That's right.
Here.
We do.
And quite frankly, this has been a company that's been quite fun to watch since the early days when the Southwestern Ontario Angel Group and some of the others were starting to look at it and subsequently invested. So certainly, if anybody has an interest, please do contact Christine. Feel free to contact me. I do see one Q&A here. Let me just check that very quickly to make sure that's okay. We do have one question, actually. Please describe how your technology would be used in the mining industry. For example, to extract arsenic from wastewater and gold tailings ponds, which I've seen a few companies attack. So
right.
I'll throw it over to you.
So I'm chuckling because I've had that exact question more than one time before. So ion exchange is actually, as a concept, is probably one of, if not the best way to capture things like arsenic. Also metals, also salts, sulfates and chlorides. So yes, the answer is yes. And then it becomes a question of what would that process look like? So simply put, I'll leave it at that.
Fair enough. And we actually do have one other question in terms of what scale up, and this is an interesting question for all clean tech companies when they're specifying that they're sort of looking at scale up. What does scale up mean to you in terms of capacity for the mining industry? Is it 100 liters a minute? Is it, what does that look like?
So I'm just going to, so this 100 liter a minute, as an example here, the mining industry is probably, one of the examples of the way it's used in mining is, that's currently in discussion, is for water reuse. So because in the mining process, the water picks up metals, it picks up various different things in the process, and it's hard to reuse. But those kind of volumes would be 30 or 40 times higher than this one would be, if not even a little more than that.
Yeah, I would think so.
They're pretty big processes. This one is not this particular one, which shows here as 100 liters a minute. It's not a very big facility. Even in food processing, there are a lot bigger facilities than that.
Great. All right. Well, with that, I will invite folks to reach out to you directly, Christine.
Absolutely.
And reach out to me if you've got any questions. I'm happy to make any connections. And with that, I really did want to say thank you very much to everybody. Thank you very much to our sponsors and partners, in particular EDC, the City of Toronto, RBC, Climate Ventures, and of course Flow Ventures. And we will be hosting our next meeting fairly soon. We will be it'll be next month, and I don't know how we're already in November, but it will be in November, and we'll be sending out the date very shortly. So thank you very much. We'll be showcasing another company next time and focusing on another aspect of the clean tech ecosystem. So for now, thank you very much, and we'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.